What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the Saturday two-gamer. Yes, two games on a Saturday. In Week 16, we have the Texans and the Chiefs. We have the Steelers and the Ravens. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, and we're going to break down the injuries in these two games. We'll talk about the underperformers. There are a couple, and then the strategies on how to beat the two-gamer and how to win the biggest prizes on DraftKings and FanDuel. And then also we'll hit some showdown notes as well because there are some decent prizes on the individual showdown slates. And we missed you last time, but he's back this time. Jack, architect of the lineup builder, short slate crusher. Jack, man, what's up? How you doing?
Hey Brian, doing great. I was very sad to miss the last one. I hope I trust you entertained. Yeah, back to do more of this. Is this almost the last one before playoffs, or what else we got?
We have a special Christmas slate, two gamer, if you're available. I know you're a degenerate, so you will be available, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I think that's gonna be one like from the mom's house, like in the basement. You're like, oh, I'll be up for dinner in a second.
The
But
viewers have been clamoring for an off location, Jack. We got the car video earlier in the year, so looking forward to that location. So let's not waste any more time. I know a lot of you tune in just for the picks. We'll get to those as well. If you have questions, go ahead and comment on the video. We're recording this Friday evening, so we have a good idea of injury situations, but there's one in particular that we're not 100% sure about. So make sure you check back with our daily plug, occupyfantasy.com, and check in with our Discord server later this evening and tomorrow on Saturday, as well as our model and ownership will update whenever we get official news. So, Jack, let's jump into it. Let's start with the injuries in both of these games. We'll start with the Houston side. I'll name out the injuries, and you just give me some general thoughts about it. Really, it's just one. John Mechie, their number 3 wide receiver, is out for Houston and not hugely productive, but is playing snaps. And anybody who plays snaps on a short slate is relevant. And it sounds like Robert Woods is the most likely candidate to replace John Mechie here. And Robert Woods is the minimum price on DraftKings. So, someone we have to play, I assume, if we're playing multiple lineups, just because he is a warm body and we know he's performed in the past.
yeah, I think as we'll get to, and you mentioned before we came on, the trash plays are pretty bad on the slate. But do you think this seems like one that actually is a viable, like he's gonna play, he has a little bit of floor, and he's not gonna be 30% owned?
Yeah, I mean, this as we'll talk about in the strategy section, we're not hurting for salary savings here. It's a very soft pricing slate, so we don't have any of these values that will be super high owned or super popular. And the same goes for Baltimore as well when we get to them with the potential injury replacements over there. And if we're looking for another reason to play Woods, if we flip to the other side of this game, Kansas City is going to be without their starting slot corner, Shamari Connor. So that's a bump to any guys running routes out of the slot. That is primarily Robert Woods' role. So just another reason to play him there. Perhaps the biggest news of the slate, and at least in this game, is Hollywood Brown making his anticipated 2025 debut. Remember, he signed in the offseason with the Chiefs, promptly broke his collarbone in the preseason, been on injured reserve ever since. Jack, he's coming back. We know Hollywood has been a deep threat and a fantasy producer when he's been on the field, and the sites forgot about him. He's been priced on DraftKings.
That is interesting. I'm trying to find him on FanDuel. Where is he?
Let's take a look. I'll pull it up on my side as well.
Hollywood Brown is 56. So he's 5,600, which if he was like 445, and the sites picked him up, he might randomly get 20% owned. But like 56 is enough that just look at the other players in that range. I don't think he's gonna get ownership. I love that.
I
I
love that
mean,
too. I mean, even our
he's
early initial
starting
our initial
Pittsburgh receivers 55, 51.
yeah. Our initial ownership projections aren't even picking up much ownership for him on DraftKings either. I assume the field is going to be scared to play him coming back. It's a little bit crowded there, right? DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy. But Jack, I mean, if you've played any Kansas City slates all year, you know that these receivers haven't really been producing. It's not like it's a super crowded room where he's not going to get any playing time.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, these these trash plays are good when they're low owned, but they're especially good if they can catch a deep ball and score a touchdown. Like in contrast to Robert Woods, right? He's a low eight out player. Like Hollywood Brown could run 5 routes and catch one pass for 50 yards and win the slate. Yeah, man, I think that's a good one. And as we'll get to, to if people are wondering like why aren't these guys owned, salary is pretty soft on this slate. And we'll get into more examples, but that's why you're going to see some of these players just not getting any ownership because they don't have to go there.
Exactly. Exactly. Just one quick note on this game. If you watched and if you hate Kansas City, you're probably already aware of this, but Patrick Mahomes hurt his ankle in last week's game. And you see on Twitter, everyone's like, oh, of course he hurt his ankle. He always hurts his ankle this time of year. He's faking it, whatever. Uh, then this is probably music to your ears, to, at least to your conspiracy theories, because he got a full practice this week. He's not even on the injury report. So Jack Mahomes is good to go. And let's just talk about the quarterbacks really quickly. We have Lamar and Mahomes. And then we have Russell Wilson and CJ Stroud, a pretty good quarterback slate, which, just as a side note, is a big change from I think all of the slates we've done so far this year. Most of the slates we've done have had some pretty bad quarterbacks.
Yeah, this is refreshing. I mean, they're all viable for sure. Yeah, we don't have to deal with Danny DeVito. We don't have to deal with. Do we have to deal with any like blizzard weather here? Let me. I don't. I think it's supposed to be fine tomorrow, right? I'm
Yeah,
gonna look
both
real quick.
both games look fine, at least according to the icons on FanDuel here. But if you want to double check for me, that would be great.
Let's trust but verify the FanDuel state of the art weather icon. If it was DraftKings, I'd probably trust it, but
Yeah, I think that's probably a justified move to double check that. So while you look that up, I'll go ahead and talk to the second game, the injuries. Backup quarterback Justin Fields is out for Pittsburgh, which may not seem like a big deal, but he has taken some short yardage snaps since he was relegated to the backup role. So Russell Wilson will play every single snap. Also helps Najee Harris and Jalen Warren a little bit because no fear of a quarterback sneak or a quarterback rush attempt from Justin Fields around the goal line or in short yardage situations. George Pickens still remains out with that hamstring injury, so they're going to go with this incredible, somehow real wide receiver room of Calvin Austin, Mike Williams, Van Jefferson, Scotty Miller, Ben Skoranek. If we look at the routes run last week, it was in that order. Calvin Austin ran 25. Van Jefferson actually ran 23. Mike Williams ran 15, and then Skoranek and Miller combined for 10, about 5 each. Uh, Jesus, I mean that is a. I mean we talk about trash plays, Jack. That is as bad as it gets for an NFL wide receiver room.
it is. And this is an interesting question. We might as well start here. We're gonna go team by team. Like, do you 4-man stack or 5-man, I guess DK, but Pittsburgh, and specifically, would you play multiple pass catchers? I guess I'm gonna argue yes. One, because Baltimore's defense is pretty bad, and I think it's an ownership angle. As we'll get to, like the trash plays are kind of bad, right? So if you're gonna play these bad 30% owned Pittsburgh receivers, a unique way to play them is like play their quarterback. Because people probably he's the lowest on quarterback by far.
Yeah, I mean, let's say it this way: I wouldn't go out of my way to play a 4-man Pittsburgh stack, or at least with 2 of the receivers. I would allow it, and their projections are mostly kind of bad. So I'm not sure, even if you're building 20 lineups or 150 lineups, you'll end up with that many. Let's say Calvin Austin and Mike Williams lineups together with Russell Wilson. I think the actual best way to 4-man stack Pittsburgh is Russ Wilson, one of the running backs, one of the receivers, and Pat Fryermuth.
Yeah, and that's great. That's a good pivot actually. I said 2 receivers, 2 pass catchers. Yeah, that's really what I meant. So okay, so I think we found some common ground there. And yeah, I mean, like we said, people aren't going to do it. And but Brian, I think if you do that, you're going to probably find a lot of lineups that leave salary. What are your thoughts on that?
Dude, so we keep saying as we'll get to, because the most important section of this show, if you've been watching for years, is the strategy section, and we will get to that here in a second. Mostly just want to go team by team, but leaving salary, I think, might be one of the best strategies for this entire slate because of this pricing we keep referencing. Really quickly, also on Pittsburgh's side, they're missing one of their starting safeties, Deshaun Elliott. Their starting corner, Dante Jackson, is also questionable. So that absence and that questionable nature of Dante Jackson is a bump to the Baltimore passing game. So if you're looking for reasons to play Lamar Jackson and his pass catchers, which is a point of conversation for this slate, Jack, because Nelson Aguilar is out for Baltimore. He's dealing with a concussion, did not progress through the protocol. And the biggest question mark on the entire slate is Rashad Bateman. Deontay Johnson has been waived from the team. He was given a leave of absence and now just officially outright waived from the team, so he's no longer a factor. They could have used him this week. But Bateman got hurt in practice on Wednesday, didn't finish practice, then was seen in a walking boot in Thursday's practice, and that doesn't seem great because he didn't practice at all. However, I guess there's a report out there from Albert Breer saying that the Ravens initially feared it would be pretty bad, but they got some good news that it's not that serious. But Jack, I mean, we've seen crazier things happen, and maybe it is truly precautionary, and maybe he'll shed the boot tomorrow and he'll play. But in a walking boot 2 days before a game generally doesn't lead to someone playing. They did call up the veteran receiver Anthony Miller, but they are pretty short anyways. So if Bateman can't go, it's just 4 receivers. It's Zay Flowers, it's Tylan Wallace, it's Devontae Walker, and the recently elevated Anthony Miller. What is your read on this Bateman situation? We'll get official news tomorrow morning, but for those who are building lineups tonight and want to get a read one way or the other, what are you thinking?
Um, I mean, I don't claim to be an expert. My gut would be if you're in a boot and you're not practicing, you're not playing. And this is very interesting to me. I mean, we always talk about, and I'm particular. You could probably make a mashup of all the times I'm like, don't play the super elite running quarterback that's 80% owned. But it seems like Lamar is as playable as any elite rushing quarterback is on a two gamer because of one, the salary, which we'll get to, and two, this situation, right? I mean, Isaiah Likely we have is sub 10% at least on FanDuel. I don't know what is he on DraftKings.
Not much higher. Definitely less than 20. We have him 10 to 15% right now.
Yeah, so I mean, they already like two tight end sets. If they're down a pass catcher, I would have said you could play both tight ends in the same lineup anyway.
Yes.
If they're down Bateman and Aguilar, easily can play that. And then beyond that, you're going to have at least one or two receivers getting. I'm just looking at their snap counts. They play four receivers, and at least three of them will play half the time. So yeah, I think this is as good a slate as you're going to get if you want to eat the chalky, 50%, 40, 50% owned elite quarterback. That's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. And if Bateman's out, even if Bateman's in, these guys are playable because Aguilar's out as well. So Tylan Wallace, let's just look at his game logs really quickly. I mean, he had a 23-point game on like 6 routes earlier in the season. He's a talented guy, punt returner. And then Devontae Walker, who really hasn't played much this year, but finally got in the game last week and caught his first pass in the NFL for a touchdown. Rookie draft pick. So talented guys, at least, that you can stack up with Lamar. And again, all are incredibly cheap. I love the double tight end call. I mean, I don't see any reason why, if this is the case, why you wouldn't put Andrews in line and then put Isaiah Likely in the slot. And I think we will see them do that a lot. So both those guys are fantastic plays. All right, I think that wraps up the injury section. Let's move on to the underperformers. For those who are not familiar with our channel or Occupy Fantasy and what underperforming wide receivers are, basically we look at the trailing 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks of stats, and what a guy should have scored based on his opportunity, where the passes have been on the field, how close to the goal line, where they've been tackled, yards after catch. And based on that, what they should have scored, compare that to what they actually scored. And guys who underperform generally spike at a pretty high rate in the following week. We have two official underperforming wide receivers on this slate, and we have an unofficial underperforming running back. Jack, let's start with the receivers. One's a receiver, actually, and one's a tight end. Both are for Kansas City, DeAndre Hopkins and Travis Kelce. What's the first thing you think of when you see that both Hopkins and Kelce are the two underperformers for this slate?
I guess I'm in shock because normally we see this with elite pass catchers that have kind of bad quarterback play, right? Because they're getting thrown to a lot, and I don't know if this is indicative of Mahomes playing poorly or if it's just a variance thing. But I mean, yeah, I'm interested. That's my initial thought.
Yeah, I think we obviously should be interested. Do you have ownership of right now? I know Kelsey will be popular. Hopkins will be somewhat popular. But again, playing them together as super stacking Mahomes, I don't think is something that the field will do. So playing them together is another great option.
Well, and this is the lowest Mahomes ownership we'll ever see on a short slate, probably because of the injury, right? I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I feel like the projection systems haven't adjusted that much, but I just feel like he's probably going to go, and we haven't projected to go a little bit lower than what he might go without the injury.
I mean, also he's been terrible for fantasy this year. That's the other factor. Like he's had one or two
Yeah.
games over 20 points, which is why people aren't rushing to play him. But against Houston with two underperforming wide receivers, if there is a slate to capitalize, these are the slates we want to capitalize on. And it's not like he runs that much in the regular season. If this is a playoff game where he typically runs more, I'd be more concerned about the ankle. But again, has the weapons and now getting Hollywood back just adds another cheap low owned piece that we can add to any Mahomes stacks.
And I think we can kind of do this team by team, but thoughts on the overstacking Mahomes? It's probably not much of a discussion. Probably a ton of ways you could do it, and you absolutely should. But what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think you absolutely can. And then you consider the fact that the other underperformer, which is under an unofficial list that we have, we look at running backs because it's not as predictive as wide receivers, but we like to pass this information along for short slates because we're looking for any edge that we can. It's Isaiah Pacheco, who came back from injury a couple of weeks ago. He's underperformed, but so is Kareem Hunt. So, Jack, maybe just seeing that three Chiefs are underperforming, four if you include Hunt, maybe it is just a factor of this offense that something about this offense is causing basically every single player to underperform. Obviously, the centerpiece around that is Mahomes, but it could be offensive line or the play calling as well. But I guess when I see that, it's not necessarily that we need to jam all these guys into our lineup because clearly there's something that's holding all of them back. And it's unlikely that they find whatever that spark is to get them back performing to their mean expectations in week 16.
Yeah, and on the flip side, you can also just say don't overthink it. If you've been playing Occupy Fantasy NFL this year, when that blue squiggle arrow is next to a guy's name, they generally just shred. So if you're in doubt, I mean, you can go there. And like you're saying, doesn't mean you have to overstack Kansas City, but you absolutely should look for ways to play these guys and just, this is an easy one to just eat the ownership on because, we have the expectation that they're going to hit. So.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to the strategy section and let's talk about the three main ways to win huge prizes because Jack has done this basically every year since we've been doing these videos. He's won a big prize on a short slate, and he's used some combination of these three strategies. Mega stacking, that's playing a bunch of guys from one game. Playing low owned plays, we classify that as under 20% ownership on either FanDuel or DraftKings. And leaving salary on the table, which we've talked about many times here. You mentioned mega stacking a couple times there in the last segment, Jack. So let's start with that mega stacking. If you run optimal lineups across the industry, you'll see some of the top 10, top 20 lineups mega stack, meaning 3, 4 guys from one side, 1, 2 guys from the other side in the same game. So, for instance, it would be something like if we're talking about this Kansas City example, it would be Mahomes, Pacheco, DeAndre Hopkins, Travis Kelsey, and then running it back with Joe Mixon and Nico Collins. I don't know if you can fit this. Maybe you can. Yeah. So 4-2 stack like this. The idea here is that the scoring in the other game is concentrated, or this game just scores way more points than the other game. And you'd be surprised at how much leverage this provides and how often it does win on short slates. So I think, and Jack, you're the expert here when it comes to short slates, but to me, when we have two relatively bad fantasy games, obviously we have Nico and Joe Mixon on Houston side, but I think it leads to more reasons to mega stack in the hopes that one of these games goes off when both are so bad.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we just see it time and again where like some team is in a smash spot on a short slate and they just for whatever reason like they stall in the red zone. They a backup running back scores a rushing touchdown, like whatever, right? And you're just sitting there like, how does this quarterback have 5 points in the third quarter against this defense? But yeah, I'm with you, and especially I mean we've got Derrick Henry who easily could steal all the touchdowns. Joe Mixon has been very heavily used, lots of opportunities. You mentioned the Kansas City running backs underperforming, so yeah, I think all these games have running back that could steal a lot of points. I mean that's the first thing I look for. But yeah, I'm with you, man. I think overstacking is certainly in play, and like you said, the quarterbacks are good on this slate, so there's a lot more. It's a lot less gross to
Yeah,
me
and
about
I
this one.
and I said bad games, and I'll clarify that. I just think the scoring could be the fantasy scoring could be lower in some of these games, especially the second divisional matchup with Pittsburgh and Baltimore. And Kansas City has been underwhelming this year. I don't want to ever say this is a bad slate when Jack, God forbid, we've had some really bad slates in the past. This is probably all jokes aside, four probably decent teams to have on a short slate because even this year we've had some really bad games. So I don't want to sell that short whatsoever. So I think mega stacking, playing 4, 5, even 6 guys from one team here. Do you have a favorite of the 4 teams or a game of the 2 games that you're looking to play more than the others?
I think it's tough, man. Initially I was thinking what you said, the divisional rematch, fade that a little bit and go the other game, but I don't know, man. After talking through this with you, it just seems so easy to play Lamar Jackson and build unique lineups that it's just really tempting to. I mean, even if he doesn't have a ceiling game, like he might still be optimal. Or we've seen these slates where like when a stud is so owned that there's just no one has the optimal, even if that stud doesn't have their ceiling game. Like that slate, Tyreek Hill was like 80% owned, right? He
Yeah,
still won.
yeah, right.
So yeah, man, I think it's close. I guess I would slightly lean towards playing Lamar, but I think both are very interesting. So you lean the first game, you think?
I think so, but let me ask you this because I know you are known sometimes to play 100% of a quarterback on a short slate, a Josh Allen, or even some. You're even willing to take more stances sometimes, even when the quarterbacks aren't as strong as some of the guys on this slate. But it sounds to me like you're more willing to spread your quarterbacks out on this slate as opposed to going all in on one guy. And if that guy that you do go all in on would be Lamar, is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think spreading out makes sense here. Just I mean, Lamar like we just said, you can get unique with him. We have 20% on Mahomes with 2 underperforming pass catchers. I'm just like, I feel like I'm just not going to overthink that, you
Yeah,
know.
true.
And then yeah, Stroud's got a funnel pass catcher and some cheap options like Woods and the tight end. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he'll get to Russell Wilson. We'll see. But
That mean it's the
that
DeVito rule.
receiver room, man.
It's the DeVito rule. It's the DeVito rule.
It is. It is the DeVito rule. It is. I
But I
know.
think that,
You're right.
and this can transition to the next strategy is leaving salary. Generally, when you want to play the cheapest quarterback, one of the outs on a short slate is that the the way the salaries and the way the scoring shakes out is that sometimes the quarterback doesn't necessarily score the most points, but he's the optimal because he fits in because you can fit in higher price studs at other positions. Now Russ is the cheapest quarterback here, 5,700 on DraftKings compared to Lamar 82, but we don't have that dynamic. I mean, if you look here, right? You look at the running backs. We have Henry and Mixon, obviously 7,800, 8K. But then you have Pacheco, Harris, Warren. All of those guys can fail. You look at wide receivers, Nico 81, and then the next most expensive receiver who's actually playing is Zay Flowers at 59 on DraftKings. You look at tight end, the most expensive is Kelsey at 56, and you have Andrews at 43, and the other guys are under 4. There's there a 3K guy could be the top scorer at tight end and receiver, and a 4K guy, a 5K guy could be the top scorer at running back if it shakes out properly. So we don't get that win condition of Russ just barely squeaking into the optimal because he fits. So that's another reason I wouldn't play him there. But if we tie it back to salary, man, I mean, I think that might be the best way because the low owned plays are pretty gross. Mega stacking may be somewhat popular. You can leave a lot of salary here because so many of the studs and the way the price is super soft. You can fit whoever you want.
Yeah, let's transition to that. So I think we just mentioned, overstacking is the first play that we always advocate, and you certainly can do it. We've talked about how to do that. We did mention this, but just to recap for folks, the trash plays, the low owned plays are pretty weak on this slate that we talked about. Some of the and like Brian, what you were just saying is the high owned plays are really weak on
Yeah.
this slate,
Yeah.
right? Which leads us to the third rule, which is you can leave salary to get unique, and that's the point you're making is that Najee Harris literally got 35% of the running back snaps last week. And he did have more touches, but not that many more. And he's going to be like 50, 60% owned. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. That says it all. That says it all. Like,
um,
I mean, would even, I don't even know if it's even unlikely, if not possible, if not more than likely, that Justice Hill, who's $1,000 cheaper, outscores him with a couple catches. Like, it's very possible, especially if Harris has a down game.
yeah, because Harris runs for 2 yards a carry unless he falls in the end zone. And then you've got these Pittsburgh receivers that are like 30% owned, I, I don't know, man. And then if the Baltimore receivers are out too. So yeah, I think leaving salary is and let's talk about I think since a lot of our viewers are building hand builds, obviously for MME it's easy to just be like, all right, I'm gonna leave a bunch of salary. Like what's your approach to leaving salary when you're building for small field?
Yeah, that makes it much tougher because in small field or limited number of lineups, you don't want to take any crazy stances, right? You don't want to leave a lineup where you could upgrade from Calvin Austin to Nico Collins because the odds of that happening, or the odds of it happening and impacting your small field lineup or small field contest is really small. Large field, yeah, small field, not so much. Running back, Justice Hill when you could have played Joe Mixon. Great large field idea, leaving 3,000 when you could upgrade. Not a great small field idea. So I think the biggest thing is basically the stud at each position, Henry, Mixon, and Nico Collins. Those three specifically, I would not leave enough salary to where you can upgrade from a much cheaper, much lower owned guy to those guys. But anyone beyond that, Kelsey even included here because likely, like you say, could outscore him at 2,300 cheaper. That's fine. So I just want to make sure if I'm building small field or hand building that I'm not leaving too much where I could upgrade theoretically to Henry, Mixon, or Collins. Those are the three keys that I would be looking at.
I mean, I think that's as clear as you can make it for folks that are hand building. I think I'm probably going to rewatch this section of the video if I'm building some hand builds. So yeah, and then I think as far as if people are wondering how much to leave on like large field, I'm with you, man. I don't know that you have to set a minimum here. I think it's like you said, you kind of those three players, set it so like you can't upgrade to those three players, and I think that's probably going to leave you at least three to 4K in a lot of lineups. At least 3K. I don't know if 4K is too crazy, but point is a lot.
Yes. Let me ask you: is it possible, or do you just have to look at this afterwards in the lineup builder? Could you set special salary rules for each of those three studs? Like normally we're thinking of salary rules for cheaper guys, but could you set a salary rule for Nico to not leave so much? But I guess that wouldn't work. It would be the opposite effect, right? I'm just trying to think of an easier way for members to use the builder for those specific scenarios, but it may be difficult.
Well, which yeah, I think you'd probably have to do it the other way. You'd have to pick out the trashier plays you're
Mm.
using and set the minimum to whatever the amount is, so you can't upgrade. Right? It's a little more tedious. That's an interesting idea, though. Think about that for the off season, maybe when not in lineup. Here's the salary range.
Yeah, yeah, that would be cool. That would actually would be cool. All right, let's talk about the low owned plays really quickly at each position. At running back, we already talked about Russell Wilson. At quarterback, he's going to be around 10% on both sides. Next, we have Justice Hill and Kareem Hunt. These complementary, I wouldn't call them a committee back, but secondary running backs in their offenses. Both could get there, not in the same lineup ideally, but we see backup running backs win seemingly almost every slate at this rate. So those guys have to be in play. Justice Hill specifically. At receiver, this is where it gets really gross. We have Mike Williams. We have Van Jefferson. Even if Rashad Bateman plays, we have him as low owned. And if he's out, Tylan Wallace, because you don't need salary, we expect Tylan Wallace to be the number 2 receiver. He still won't be that popular either. Robert Woods won't be popular, who we've talked about as well. He may be one of the best low owned plays. And then you have Juju Smith Schuster and Justin Watson. I mean, that wide receiver group of low owned guys, Jack, is probably the worst low owned group we've ever seen on a 2 game slate.
Yeah, and I mean, how many times, Brian, have we had done videos where we were like, well, we got all these lone Kansas City
I
receivers,
know,
and it's just
dude.
like Kelsey gets 15 catches,
I know.
and Mahomes runs on third down. So, yeah, it's gross. I think you hit on the head. The backup running backs is the place to look, probably more so than these horrible receivers.
The best one though, the best low owned play in the slate is the aforementioned Isaiah Likely, under 10% on both sides, maybe around 10%. Should see an uptick in targets if Bateman is limited or out. And because Andrews has typically been the guy lately, the field isn't rushing to play Likely at all, especially when you have Kelsey and Firemouth on the slate. And Noah Gray's beginning some action as well as the number 2 in Kansas City. I mean, Likely has to be the best low owned play on the slate.
Yeah, and you mentioned this earlier, so shout out to you for calling this. I looked at Pro Football Focus Premium while you were talking. Likely on the season, 56% of his snaps are in the slot.
There you go.
And this week they're missing Aguilar, who plays 51% of his snaps in the slot. Mark Andrews plays 60% of his snaps in the slot. So I think we're going to see a tight end at slot almost every snap with Baltimore. So yeah, love that.
Dude,
Likely, easy.
love that call. All right, guys, we don't want to spend too much time here. Let's close out the show with some showdown plays. And if you're playing the Houston Kansas City showdown or the Pittsburgh Baltimore showdown, I'll give you some DraftKings specific notes. Jack will give you an angle or two for the FanDuel slates for those 2 games. Before we get into that, though, make sure you are subscribed here on YouTube. It's free to do so. You'll get notified when we go live or upload videos. The main slate video for Sunday, Chris will post that Saturday evening. And then, of course, if you want to come back and see the Christmas video, if you're a degen like us and you're going to be playing the 2-gamer on Christmas, you won't want to miss our takes and our strategies for that. So just subscribing is the best way to, one, help the channel in a free way. It's free to do so. Just click subscribe below the video. But 2, it lets you know whenever we post a video here on our channel. So, all right, Jack. Let's start with Houston and Kansas City. And it's very similar if you played the Monday night DraftKings showdown. The Thursday night showdown between the Chargers and the Broncos last night, where the top 4 guys were the most popular captains. We'll see that here for the Kansas City and Houston game, where it's going to be Collins, Mixon, Mahomes, and Stroud getting most of the ownership there. Popular values will be Dalton Schultz, who without Kate Stover has been running basically every route at tight end for Houston. Noah Gray, who's been producing as number 2 tight end for Kansas City, he'll be popular as well at 3,200. And then Robert Woods, he'll be much more popular on the showdown slate because he's only $1,000 and allows you to fit in those studs. If you're looking to pivot away from those guys, we have Hollywood Brown, who's only 3,000, coming back on the showdown slate. And then if we're wrong about Robert Woods, I don't think we are, but there's always an off chance if you're building 20 plus or 150 plus lineups. Xavier Hutchinson could be the guy. We've seen him play some this year. So Jack, the final angle I'll give for this game is that it'll be mostly balanced builds from the field on DraftKings. So building 5-1 or 4-2 onslaughts from either direction, Houston or Kansas City, will be unique. Are you seeing similar types of things on FanDuel? And if so, what are some of the strategies or maybe an angle that you're looking at over there?
Yeah, I mean, I think to echo the don't overthink it, there are two underperforming pass catchers in this game that are actually good at football. So, I think we've talked, we've complained about this, but the scoring and the pricing dynamic for whatever reason is just really shoving people to play quarterbacks heavily. So I think you're going to see Collins and the quarterbacks, and probably Mixon as the highest owned MVPs. So if you want to play those guys, I think like you mentioned, Noah Gray is kind of one of those guys that always has the split site dynamic where he can be owned quite a bit on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, the pricing is such that guys like that just don't get that much ownership. But if he gets touchdown, a few catches, he could be optimal. And then, as you mentioned, all of those Houston receiver plays you just mentioned, I think equally applicable on FanDuel if you want to play the chalkier captain or MVPs. And then, yeah, if you want to pivot away, I would just look no further than the two underperforming elite pass catchers for Kansas City, and that's been successful this year. I would just ride with that.
Even in this game, right? I mean, these guys aren't as cheap as the last couple of slates or last weeks of slates have been. But still, Mahomes 14K and Stroud 13.5. That's still like $2,000 cheaper than they would have been last year on the Showdown slates, right?
It's insane. Mahomes was a 17. Mahomes and Lamar were 17, 17.5 every slate. And yeah, so this is a little more reasonable. But like last week, both of them were like 12K or something, or Monday or Thursday night. It's just like, sure enough, optimal was quarterback MVP, quarterback flex. But yeah, this is a fun one. And even you probably will see Mahomes at about the lowest MVP ownership you're ever going to get on this kind of slate. So you could easily look there, pair him with one of the underperforming guys and a low end pass catcher.
Lots of ways to play it. So definitely a fun Showdown slate. If you're not interested in the two gamer or you want to play a bunch, you could play this Showdown slate as well. Now, Pittsburgh and Baltimore is a little more, I wouldn't say as fun. Lamar, Najee, and Henry will be the popular captains on DraftKings. Popular values will be Pittsburgh's number one receiver, Calvin Austin, which is crazy to say. Justice Hill, who is just 4K on DraftKings, he'll be popular as well. As will, while likely won't be popular on the main slate or the two game slate, he will be popular on the Showdown slate. And again, this goes to show the dynamics between the two different types of contests you would be playing, as is Tylan Wallace. Again, not popular on the main slate, but only 1K on DraftKings. He will be popular there. If you're looking for pivots, is Devontae Walker. We talked about the rookie. He's the minimum price on DraftKings. He's $200. Anthony Miller, who got called up, if he has any type of role whatsoever, he's the minimum price as well. If you want to get different, lots of ways to play some lower owned guys with Lamar Jackson. And even though Jack the Field is building Baltimore heavy, they're going to play Lamar Jackson heavily at captain because of this wide receiver situation, and because of even on FanDuel guys like Likely and stuff. I think it could be a slate where you go 100% Lamar and you have so many options to get different with him.
Yeah, I like that. I think, like you said, Baltimore heavy, so just going Pittsburgh heavy with Lamar is a very viable way to play. I mean, if Lamar rushed for 3 rushing touchdowns and scored all the points, would that shock anyone? No, right? So he's a guy you don't really have to like stack with. Um, I don't. We don't usually talk about defenses, but Pittsburgh defense has a horrendous projection on a lot of the popular sites, and I mean, I think you made this point a couple weeks ago, like. I'll take a 5% owned Micah Parsons defense anytime. Like TJ Watt, I'll take a TJ Watt owned
Yes.
or TJ Watt 5% owned defense in a divisional rematch game. Hope for a sack, fumble, touchdown. And then yeah, I think so. I think just Pittsburgh heavy, and I'm kind of with you. I don't know that you want to try to shove in on fading Lamar. Say how many times have I advocated fading Lamar on these kind of slates? It doesn't seem like the right one with the receiver room and the running back uncertainty. I mean, you could play Henry, but I wouldn't go any further than those two probably. And to your point, I would look at ways to get different through Pittsburgh heavy, through likely, stuff like that.
Could you play? I guess would you play Henry and Lamar together? I would lean yes because Pittsburgh sucks, at least like in terms of fantasy production. And then two, would you play
Oh
Pittsburgh
yeah,
defense against Lamar MVP?
I think so. And dude, I hate saying this, but we've you put out reading material, and we've done videos that say like don't do this, but playing a defense as the only player on the team, like I mean Pittsburgh is so bad in these like snap counts and stuff, opportunities are so spread out. Like wouldn't shock me if like a 4-by-1 with Pittsburgh defense was optimal. I probably won't do it, but I mean, I don't think I would like, hate someone if they did it. Yeah, I would definitely play him against Lamar though. I think that's how they get there, right? Some sort of like pick six and then causes Lamar to try harder.
I think so too. And again, we've as bad as that lineup I just put on screen looked, that has won FanDuel slates before purely because of the pricing. Does it make sense? No. I guess it makes some sense in some ways because you need some players, and if the offense is devoid of fantasy production, the defense slides in there. More likely with the kicker, obviously, but if the Pittsburgh doesn't score that many points, that type of 4v1 defense lineup can actually work, as gross as it sounds. So, and if Jack, if you win with that, you can just retire because I think you would have won with every type of lineup at that point.
Oh man. Yeah, that'll be fun. Now I think I have to play some just because we talked about it. Just because I want to be able to cue this part of the video up.
I know. Exactly. All right, guys, that'll do it. Appreciate you watching as always. I know most of you like the longer videos, so we appreciate you sticking around until the very end for that. Again, subscribe, like the video. That helps us out in a free way. If you want all the information you could possibly have to beat this slate, you want to go beyond this video, check out OccupyFantasy.com where you get the daily plug, a full rundown of the Classic and Showdown slate. It's a written article. Our model, which ranks every player for FanDuel and DraftKings for all of the slates, projected ownership for the two-gamer and individual Showdown slates for DraftKings and FanDuel, and the lineup builder that Jack, architect of the lineup builder, allows you to build up to 300 lineups for any slate using all the rules that we use to win big prizes on DraftKings and FanDuel. So, Jack, I appreciate you joining me. I'll see you in a couple days for Christmas. Good luck on this slate, and hope you use one of your run goods on one of these two gamers here shortly. Ideally on this one, that way we can come back and promote it for the Christmas video.
Sounds great. Good luck to you as well, and I'll see you on here in a couple days.
All right, guys, take care. Thanks and good luck and enjoy this Saturday slate.